Hi everyone, welcome to another wonderful, exciting, and creative edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I am delighted to be talking with someone who's been creating in the world of comics for some time, and that is author artist John Reiner. May I call you John? Is that okay?
Yes, you may. Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
very much. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you for the time. Thank you for jumping on, and I'll mention a couple of works. I know that you are connected to the worlds of Marvel and Mad, and then you also have the Lockhorns as the comic strip that is out there with King Features that is locatable on the webs. Is all of this true?
Yes. Well, King Features was the syndicate. We switched over to Andrews McMeel Universal
Ah, okay.
team. So we have switched over. But yes, so the rest of that is quite true.
Great, 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 great.
Yes, and now
Uh,
with the Universal.
Wonderful. Well, I usually ask sort of an origins question to start out with, and in this case, that is, what has ironically drawn you to comics, visual storytelling, and this world of creating in the visual?
I would have to be saying, actually, Mad Magazine was the most influential. I think everybody, we had a Reuben Award panel a couple of years ago with most of the guys from Mad, the editor, Nick Meglin, and we had Grant Geisman, who was one of the collectors. We had at that time Bill Morrison, who was the editor. And people would say, the baby boomers would often ask, where were you when you heard that Kennedy was shot? But there was also, where were you when you discovered Mad Magazine? And
Hmm.
everybody had an origin story, and mine was that I was just a kid on Long Island, happened to have a friend who had a collection. When I first saw it, I was just absolutely captivated by every part of it. And ultimately, I just said, as I got into high school, I just never put down the drawing materials. Everybody else, of course, had moved on, gravitated towards whatever interest. I was working on their cars or picking up a guitar or something. I was still drawing. So I said, maybe this is something that I should consider doing for a career. Although guidance counselors and teachers and all thought I was insane, but basically, Mad was that coupled with the comics at that time. And I have to just say, it was also buoyed by the fact that um, the comics page had just seen Gary Trudeau's Doonesbury in
Hmm.
1970. And that kind of opened up the comics page. So those two areas were the most influential in terms of, graphic humor.
Yeah, yeah. But I kind of chuckled when you were talking about teachers because that happens to be my day job, which is teaching, which is why I'm probably having a little trouble talking. I've been talking all day. Um, and I'm constantly encouraging students to read and draw and create and write and make. So, kind of interesting how that pendulum swings in some places.
Well, I'm glad that you're being supportive with a lot of the kids. Back in, I guess it was around 1972, 73, when I was in high school, the guidance counselor had asked me, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I love caricatures and humorous illustration." And she thought that I was going to set up some sort of kiosk in the mall and, draw up people passing by. They didn't really have an understanding of the large amount of print and other outlets, including advertising, that used illustration, and they weren't really aware of the gods of that era. The Jack Davis, Mort Drucker, and every Jerry Gersten, all the people that were doing artwork at the time for large posters, advertising, so forth. So. Nevertheless, I didn't listen to them, but I'm glad that you're encouraging the kids because that there were one or two that really were very supportive when I told them that. And we stayed in touch over the years, and they've been absolutely wonderful. So I'm glad to see you doing that.
Absolutely. We do what we can. Absolutely. And glad that there were some positive voices there that saw beyond the kiosk at the mall.
Yes, yes.
Now, one of the questions that I typically ask folks that have especially worked in comic strips is that question of productivity because you have to be constant with that. That's an ongoing thing. So any secrets there to the productivity that it takes to create something like that?
Yes, as a matter of fact, well, just in case anyone didn't know, I had done most of these comics with Bill Host, who had created the Lockhorns, Agatha Crumb, What a Guy. These were three daily syndicated features that he was doing at the time of his death, along with three weekly features, which was Parade Magazine, Howard Hughes, and Bumper Snickers for the National Enquirer. So he had six features all at once. And when he passed, I took over all of that work, and I had to kind of learn immediately exactly that. What is it that one can do to make sure that productivity is paramount?
Hmm.
What I really kind of found is that number one, I didn't try to invent the wheel, reinvent the wheel. I just said whatever he has done, he has worked through. So I didn't try to really do anything new or exciting.
Hmm.
But I also felt too that it was extremely important to be responsive to the audience. As much as I may have said that I want to be an artist and express myself, the truth is nobody really cares about what I want to say and feel. It's they want to be entertained. And the goal is first understanding what it is that I'm trying to do, which is to make them laugh.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
if the audience is suddenly saying, I like that character, I like this scene, or I like that scenario, that's where I want to be responsive. Bill had said to me years ago, when he was watching a TV show like Happy Days, if the audience says, I want to see more of Fonzie, you're going to see more Fonzie, even though
Hmm.
everyone else said that's not the direction we really intended to go. You have to be responsive to the audience. And that's really the best part in terms of the productivity is to make sure that we're making the audience happy and that we're, making them laugh. So that, and then the idea of professionalism is just basically, you know what your deadlines are.
Hmm.
Nobody wants to hear your excuses. So I've been on cruises with the cartoonists. I've been at Reuben Awards, and they've been working in bathrooms at night and drawing on the drawing board and carrying things. I remember the editor I had was chasing around Brant Parker for Wizard of Iz. Where is he? I haven't seen him. Where's the stuff? He owes me all this. Oh my God, I couldn't imagine working, on trips or on trains and airplanes. But guys do that because they're just so overloaded with work. So I've learned
Wow.
professionalism and getting it done is extremely important. If you really need help, don't be afraid to ask for it. But fortunately, we've been so far ahead, we haven't necessarily had a need for that. So that really, I think, is the key is being very much in tune to what the audience wants and
Hmm.
also making sure that you do your work properly and professionally. And to me, that's been the best advice because a lot of art directors will say, my job is on the line if you're not going to produce.
Yeah.
So if you don't come through with this assignment, we're all in trouble.
Yeah.
So it's extremely important. That really, I think, is the best advice I could give to any person who's come to ask for advice is professionalism and making sure the client is happy. Because I will inject that there was a time when art directors would have people say, if you're asking me to make these changes, I would be offended because this is you're asking me to compromise my art. And
Hmm.
they keep saying, no, 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 you're a commercial illustrator. We're giving
Yeah.
you a comp, and we expect you to be responsive to these changes in the client's desires, but you're not here to express yourself. So that's kind of a lesson too that people have to learn is that this is not so much art as it is commercial illustration.
Yeah. Yeah. But keeping that audience in mind, I mean, that is such a writer skill, a creator skill, and yeah, absolutely. There are spaces I'm sure for full expression, but you have to keep the audience reading.
Well, if you are interested in fine art, that's always a side opportunity. If you have enough money coming in from your commercial material, if you want to do something that is not mandated by an art director or anyone else and you want to be free to do, you have the freedom to do that. But
Hmm.
within the context of any work, same thing as in the classroom exercise, anything else, do the work first that's assigned to you, and then you can do your extracurricular and extra credit activities.
Yeah.
So I've always found that to be a good way of telling people when they ask for advice, please be responsive to the art director's demands because that's your bread and butter and that needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. In the creative journey, I usually ask also about collaborations and folks that have been positive, supportive in the journey. So any experiences that you'd like to mention there?
Yes, the first cartoonist I met was Al Scaduto, who had done the comic strip "They'll Do It Every Time," which was created by Jamie Hatlow. People probably don't know it was an older strip. wonderful guy who encouraged me. And so I subsequently had a real collaboration with Mort Drucker from Mad Magazine.
Mm-hmm.
He and I had met when I was in high school, and we kept in touch. And he called me one day and said, "Would you like to letter my comic strip?" Which is delightful because when Mort Drucker said, "I'd like you to work for me," I was hopefully, thank God it's not yard work or something else that you can actually draw. So I went to his house. He showed me his comic strip, which was called Benchley, and he basically had created a character that was working in the White House as a sort of press secretary to, and at that time, Ronald Reagan. And the idea was that he would always stay in the administration, whoever was president,
Mm-hmm.
and they would go on and on. So they would always bring in whoever is in politics at the time, done very benignly and respectfully. And so I worked with Mort Drucker for 3 years, and I had the opportunity to see him draw, learn from him. He would lay out the cartoons. He would explain everything to me. I have sketches that he's given me about here's something you should know. Why don't you try this? It was just 3 years of being at the feet of a master that was the most incredible. And I kept saying, I'm almost embarrassed to take a check from you for the work that I'm doing because education is expensive, and I would be paying you, but apparently he felt he could pay me, and I would learn from him, and it was an extraordinary experience. I really think interning and learning is something that's kind of lost, I guess, as comic strips themselves aren't as popular as they used to be. And I don't know how many times people apprentice in the old-fashioned way, but that was just an incredible experience. And that collaboration was probably the best part of my career.
Yeah, quite a highlight. Absolutely. Well, at the moment, are there things that have your creative attention that you'd like to mention? Anything that is circling your mind creatively that you're currently exploring?
Well, as I said, yeah, we were transferring over to Universal Syndicate, and one
Hmm.
of the
Hmm.
things they're doing some extraordinary things on the ancillary side. They're doing calendars, books. So there's a kind of extracurricular approach to this. They're doing a calendar for 2025, and what they're going to do is put all of the previous cartoons together and have a 365-day calendar
Oh,
of
wow.
cartoons. And we have a book coming out probably in 2026. So we're putting all these things together. So it's kind of exciting to have, we really have been getting some very good response from the audience that's still reading, whether it's in the paper or online.
Hmm.
And so we have a lot of projects, and it still gives me a little bit of time to do some private projects, some freelance, a little bit, but not a lot of time, but enough for me to still sketch and draw. Something I encourage people to do is that when they start to get professional, they don't really put enough time into doing, live sketching or, going out and, take a sketch pad or a camera and start taking pictures of things and putting them together, doing some watercolor work with that, and research material. So it's still important to do that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. And love that speaking to range and creating across media, across forms. Love that as well.
It's interesting you say that. We were honoring Al Hirschfeld at the Rubin Awards years ago, and some kid, I've told this story many times, but someone was looking at one of the pieces that he had on display, and he said, "Oh, Mr. Hirschfeld, this is so beautiful. How long did it take you to do this?" He said, "Oh, about 97 years." It, it's the idea that one of the things when we had the opportunity to speak, and he said, one of the things that I would encourage people to do, young people, when they ask for advice, his style was so simple, and he was trying to tell people is you have to have all these skills, and then you select what you take out, so that
Mm-hmm.
if you have all of these different abilities, you are able to make a living. When somebody calls and says, "Can you do this? Can you do that?" Yes, of course I can. And I basically would see that if people are trying to develop a style, you don't want to be categorized and typecast in the way that they say, "Oh, he only does this or she only does that." Uh,
Hmm.
that's important, is to have that kind of broad range in your toolbox so that when you finally select the things you don't want for your style, that's done out of intelligence and not basically out of ignorance or lack of training. a broad education is extremely important. Even if you're not necessarily studying that subject, everything feeds into everything else. So I'll tell you this quickly. I was working at Parade magazine and I was submitting cartoons for the editor's approval.
Hmm.
And I had one caricature of James Joyce, who was typing at a computer as a laptop, and he was standing at the keyboard with great trepidation. And the caption was, "Against this better judgment, James Joyce attempts to put Finnegan's Wake through the spell check."
Nice, nice.
And so the editor writes, he says, "John, we can't use this. Nobody will get the joke." And I said, well, most people are sophisticated. They can, or they can at least Google it or So he's saying that we have to pare back a lot of the cartoons because we don't think that the audience will understand. So if
Hmm.
you have a broader range of education and understanding, you get the joke. And
Yeah,
so I think even when somebody is saying, why do I have to study the Peloponnesian War or whatever, it's I think it's still informative. It's still important to have a broader education, liberal arts in that regard. So hopefully when we do cartoons that it isn't so solipsistic and self-referential, that it's about something larger than ourselves.
yeah, yeah. And what a great learning opportunity. Sorry to go teacher on that, but you know, to see something, I can't count the number of times I saw something in a comic book, a New Yorker cartoon or something,
Mhm.
or just a throwaway line in a poem, and then went, oh, I should go look that up so that this author is going for something. I should totally try to tap into whatever that is.
Well, don't you see that too when you look at magazines, maybe the New Yorker or others, that how the sensibility has changed? It used to be that maybe in the 40s and 50s, if you looked at the New Yorker, the cartoons, Peter Arno kind of thing, Charles Adams, there was I should say, more sophisticated or educative kind of approach. Things today are different, and I was wondering
Mhm.
if you had seen the change in that as a cartoon lover.
Um, To some degree, yeah. No, no, there's really interesting stuff done, in other places in comics. There's like a dissertation in comic book form now. So
Mhm.
there's still some sophistication out there. It's just it depends on where you look, I guess.
hmm I'm glad to hear it because I think that the online comics, because as a member of the National Cartoonist Society, when we hand out awards, we've incorporated newer media. So online comics, short form, we've gotten rid of a lot of the categories that seem antiquated. There are no more sports cartoonists like Bill Gallo.
Mm,
So we don't have that category. We don't have story strips, like Apartment 3G, that's pretty much an anachronism. So we're incorporating a lot more of the contemporary, and it's great that there's this kind of egalitarian view. You can just put up your cartoons on the internet, and people have access to it. So this is one of the things about cartooning that is great for bringing in young kids to express themselves and not have to worry about a gatekeeper or somebody telling them no, is that this is very fair and equal. So it's a nice change to as well.
yeah, yeah. And I imagine you get to interact with a lot of folks that create that way with the National Cartoonist Society.
Yes, we have a very large audience, and I would say that the young kids are now filling the ranks. Some of us older guys have been, around for a while, and they're nice about it. But we are aware that things have changed. I was talking with a lot of the political cartoonists,
Hmm.
and many of them have had a difficult time because many with the newspapers either folding or cutting staff. And the idea too, which is interesting, is that there's been a larger number of conservative political cartoonists in entering the ranks as opposed to just having mostly the liberal cartoonists. So you would see a great balance, which I think is interesting and important.
Hmm.
Mike Ramirez as opposed to Mike Lukovich and and Telnis and Tom Stiglich and all these. There's great variety. So I'm delighted to see that. And yeah, so we have a whole range of people, and happily we all get along.
Nice, nice. That's what it's all about. That's the creative expression, and glad that it sounds like the creating is living on.
Yes, and there's still a future of cartooning and illustration. Advertising agencies are still around and still using that. But it's something that Tom Richmond, who had done Mad Magazine for a while, he said, when he crafted a lot of stuff when he did parodies and such for Mad, uh, it's hard to compete with a meme that's done immediately.
Hmm.
So the artisanal approach is a bit difficult if you're not using technology and materials that allow you to move quickly. But yes, the craftsmanship is something that kind of gets lost in the short deadline period in which we find ourselves. So, but yeah, there's still people out there like us who dip pens into ink wells and
Love it.
we scan them and we send them by email, but we still do things the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Well, if I'm a listener out there and I would like to see more about you, more about your work, check out the books that are on the way and things like that, or find out about the Cartoonist Society, any particular websites, resources, spaces that you would mention for listeners?
Yes, if you're interested in joining the National Cartoonist Society, because we do have various levels, people that are starting students and professionals, and well, so the National Cartoonist Society website is a wonderful resource, lots of information. As far as the Lockhorns and the cartoons we also have the Lockhorns website and also Go Comics with Andrews McMeel Universal, which is for free over on the internet. See the cartoons as well as the others. We're on ArcMax as well and other resources. You can also probably see the cartoons on your local newspaper website. But those are the most important. Andrews McMeel and National Cartoonist Society for anybody who's interested in pursuing cartooning and illustration as a possible career. We encourage people to consider the arts. It's not dead as a lot of people have been trying to say. There is illustration, there is resources and outlets and delivery systems where people get to see your work. So these are, I guess, the two best resources for people who are interested.
Wonderful. And there are readers like me that are looking for the craftsmanship and the human touch and the creativity. So appreciate
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
we have in the old days, magazines, you'd start thumbing through a magazine and you'd see an illustration, you tear it out and you say, oh, this is just something so extraordinary. I would like to see that continue. It
Yeah.
may be on your screen, it may be on your phone, but or some other device, but I'm hoping that people are motivated when they see something and say that kind of credit. Because something Mort Drucker used to say to me is that if it ever got to the point where some of these great illustrators of the past, like Norman Rockwell and others, Leyendecker, maybe they wouldn't have been as successful today when they say, well, I'll take a month or so to do this cover of the Saturday Evening Post. Uh,
Mm,
I'm sorry, we need this by the end of the week we're in a different age. So the craftsmanship and artisanal approach is something that we definitely appreciate that people come to it and say, I like the fact you took time and did this. So I'm hoping that that still continues.
same here. Same here. Absolutely. And John, thank you for a delightful talk. Have we missed anything that you want to make sure to mention before we close out?
No, I'm just going to send you some wonderful pieces from some of the other photographs of all the guys together. And really, the Cartoonist Society has been a great resource. People network, and they also have mentors, people that give advice and so forth. So I encourage anybody who's really interested to look up the National Cartoonist Society website. But that's about it. I had a wonderful time, and I thank you very much for the invite.
Absolutely. Thank you. And glad to talk again sometime soon.
Anytime.